Country music's history is filled with moments of triumph, but it's also marked by sudden heartbreaking loss. Some stars were taken in the middle of their prime, their voices silenced by violent crashes, freak accidents, or conditions that turned deadly without warning. Others never made it home from the road, leaving fans stunned and searching for answers. These weren't slow fades from the spotlight. They were instant, irreversible ends that froze careers in time and left the genre forever changed. Here are 20 of the worst fatal accidents in old country music history. Number 20, Jim Reeves. Jim Reeves was the velvet voice of Nashville, a man whose smooth baritone and polished style carried country music to audiences around the world. His crossover success gave him an international fan base, and his songs often topped charts far beyond the US, with He'll Have to Go becoming a global standard. Reeves was known for his professionalism and kindness, always staying after shows to greet fans and never turning down an autograph request. At home, he was devoted to his wife Mary, who often traveled with him when she could. By July 1964, Reeves's career was as strong as ever, but one summer storm would bring it to an abrupt end. On July 31st, 1964, Reeves took off from Batesville, Arkansas, piloting his own Beechcraft Debonair with pianist and manager Dean Manuel. As they neared Nashville, a fast-moving thunderstorm overtook the area, dropping heavy sheets of rain that made navigation nearly impossible. Reeves radioed the control tower to report poor visibility, but before further instructions could be given, contact was lost. People living nearby later told of hearing a plane circling low, followed by a single dull crash echoing through the rain. For 2 days, search teams combed wooded areas and fields until they found the wreckage just 4 miles from Reeves's home. The cabin was crumpled beyond recognition, but both men were found in their seats, evidence that the plane had gone down in a split second. The official report blamed severe weather and loss of orientation. Across Nashville, radio stations went silent for a moment in tribute, and crowds gathered outside his home, leaving flowers, vinyl records, and personal notes to the man they felt they knew. Reeves's death robbed country music of one of its most elegant voices, a reminder that even the most seasoned performers are vulnerable to fate's sharp turns, and if his story ended in the clouds, the next would end in the quiet of a home in Nashville. Keith Whitley had a voice that could melt steel, soft and aching, yet strong enough to carry the weight of an entire song. A proud son of Kentucky, he rose from bluegrass roots to become one of the most promising traditionalists in Nashville by the late 1980s. Fans adored him for his humility as much as his music. After shows, he would often stay long into the night signing programs and shaking hands. With hits like Don't Close Your Eyes and When You Say Nothing at All climbing the charts, Whitley's future seemed limitless. But behind the success, a private battle was raging, one that would claim him at the height of his career. The morning of May 9th, 1989, began quietly. Whitley's wife, Lori Morgan, left early for an out-of-town television appearance, leaving Keith at their Nashville home. According to friends, he had already started drinking before 10 a.m., a pattern that had worsened despite recent efforts to get sober. Around mid-morning, a golfing buddy arrived to pick him up and found him slumped in a chair, unresponsive. Emergency responders were called, but there was nothing they could do. He was gone before they arrived. Later, it was revealed that his blood alcohol level was more than 5 times the legal driving limit. Word spread quickly through Music Row, with stunned friends and colleagues gathering in studios and offices to share the news. DJs openly wept while announcing his death on air, and tribute songs were recorded within weeks. Fans left candles and flowers outside the Opry House, mourning not only the loss of his voice, but the loss of the career that might have defined a generation. Whitley's end was quiet but devastating, a reminder that tragedy doesn't always come roaring down a highway or through the skies. And if his death came in silence, the next was marked by the chaos of a roadside disaster. Billy Walker, known as the Tall Texan, was a pillar of the Grand Ole Opry for more than 50 years. His gentlemanly stage presence and smooth vocal delivery made him a favorite among both fans and fellow performers. Even in his later years, Walker showed no signs of slowing down. He continued to tour, often closing shows with his beloved hit Charlie's Shoes, and staying afterward to greet every fan who wanted a handshake. To younger musicians, he was a mentor and friend, always willing to share advice or lend encouragement. But in May 2006, a late-night drive home would end his life without warning. On May 21, 2006, after playing a show in Foley, Alabama, Walker, his wife Betty, bassist Charles Lilly, and guitarist Daniel Patton began the long drive toward their next stop. Rain had been falling steadily, making the narrow two-lane highway slick and treacherous. Somewhere outside Montgomery, the van veered off the road, rolling multiple times before crashing into a roadside ditch. The violence of the crash left little chance for survival. Walker, his wife, and Lily were killed instantly, while Patton was pulled from the wreck with critical injuries. Local police blocked the road for hours as Opry members, upon hearing the news, began calling one another in disbelief. At the next Opry performance, a solemn moment of silence was held for Walker, and flowers piled high at the backstage entrance in tribute. Fans from across the country mailed letters and photographs, each one honoring a man who had been a living link to country's golden years. Walker's death was a harsh reminder that for touring musicians, the road can be as dangerous as it is familiar, and if his end came on a rain-slicked highway, the next tragedy would unfold under even more treacherous conditions. Patsy Cline was the queen of country's heartbreak ballads, a voice so rich and emotive that even a single note could stop an audience in its tracks. Offstage, she was known for her generosity toward younger artists and her warm, no-nonsense personality. By early 1963, she was at the height of her career, performing to packed houses and delivering timeless songs like Crazy and I Fall to Pieces. She had just returned from a benefit concert in Kansas City when fate placed her on a small aircraft bound for Nashville, a flight that would become one of country music's darkest moments. On March 5, 1963, Cline boarded a Piper Comanche with fellow Opry stars Cowboy Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins, along with pilot Randy Hughes. The weather was overcast and windy, but not enough to cancel the trip. After refueling in Dyersburg, Tennessee, they took off for the final leg home. Less than 15 minutes later, the plane disappeared from radar. A search party fanned out across the wooded hills outside Camden, Tennessee, and by nightfall, they found the wreckage. The impact had been so violent that debris was scattered across a wide area. All on board had died instantly. News of the crash spread rapidly. Fans gathered at radio stations, some crying openly in the streets. In Nashville, Opry members held an impromptu vigil, singing the songs she had made famous. The official cause was determined to be pilot disorientation in poor weather. Cline's passing cut short a career that was still climbing and left a permanent scar on the country community. And if her death showed how quickly the sky could turn fatal, the next tragedy would prove the road could be just as unforgiving. Dottie West was one of country music's trailblazers, a singer-songwriter who broke barriers for women in the genre while maintaining a warmth that made fans feel like family. Known for her vibrant stage presence and memorable hits like A Lesson in Leavin', she was still performing regularly well into her 50s. Friends often said she had an unshakable optimism, even during hard times. But in August 1991, a routine trip to the Grand Ole Opry turned into the final moments of her life. On August 30th, West accepted a ride from a neighbor to make it to an Opry appearance. Running late, the driver accelerated to over 50 miles per hour in a 30-mile-per-hour zone, attempting to make up time. As they neared the Opryland exit on Briley Parkway in Nashville, the car lost control, skidding off the ramp and striking a concrete wall. West was critically injured, suffering massive internal injuries and multiple fractures. She was rushed into emergency surgery, but her condition worsened over the next few days. On September 4th, she passed away at the age of 58. The driver survived, later expressing deep remorse, but the accident left the country community stunned. Opry members paid tribute during her scheduled slot the following week, her microphone left standing alone under the spotlight. Dottie's death was a reminder that even the most routine drives can turn deadly in an instant, and if her final moments came on a city exit ramp, the next story would unfold far from the safety of Nashville's streets. Jack Anglin, half of the popular duo Johnny and Jack, was a familiar voice to fans of the Grand Ole Opry. Known for his upbeat delivery and strong harmonies on hits like Poison Love and Ashes of Love, Anglin was also known for his friendly manner and devotion to family. In March 1963, he had just attended the funeral of his close friend Patsy Cline, unaware that he would become part of the same tragic chapter in country history only hours later. On March 8, 1963, just 3 days after Cline's death, Anglin left his home to attend a memorial service in her honor. Driving along Franklin Pike in Nashville, he reportedly lost control of his vehicle while navigating a curve at high speed. The car skidded, left the road, and struck a tree with devastating force. Anglin was killed instantly. Police arriving at the scene noted the eerie coincidence of his death so soon after Cline's, Copas's, and Hawkins. News of the crash hit the Opry community hard. Many of the same mourners who had attended Cline's service now gathered again, reeling from yet another loss. The back-to-back tragedies became a grim reminder of how fragile life on and off the stage could be. Anglin's sudden passing added another name to a week that would forever be remembered as one of country music's darkest. And if his story showed how grief can be followed by more grief, the next would prove that danger often came in the middle of the open road. Dave Dudley was the voice of the open road, immortalizing the trucker lifestyle in hits like 6 Days on the Road and Truck Drivin' Son of a Gun. His deep, commanding voice and rugged image made him a favorite among working-class fans, and his live shows were filled with warmth, humor, and the kind of grit that came from years of touring. Even in his later years, Dudley was still performing, often telling stories between songs that made every audience feel like they were sitting around a table with an old friend. But in December 2003, the very roads he celebrated in song became the setting for his final moments. On December 22nd, Dudley was driving near his home in Wisconsin when he suffered a massive heart attack behind the wheel. His vehicle veered off the road and struck a tree, the suddenness of the event leaving no time for help to arrive. Passers-by called emergency services, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The news stunned fans who had grown up with his music and considered him the voice of the American highway. Tributes poured in from trucker associations, radio DJs, and fellow musicians who credited Dudley with bringing authenticity and respect to a niche corner of country music. His passing was mourned, not just as the loss of a singer, but as the loss of a storyteller whose songs had been the soundtrack to countless long drives. Dudley's death was a sobering reminder that sometimes the road doesn't give you a second chance, and if his life ended behind the wheel, the next story would see tragedy strike during a moment meant for celebration. David Stringbean Akeman was one of the Grand Ole Opry's most beloved entertainers, known for his tall, lanky frame, old-time banjo playing, and warm comedic charm. A gifted musician as well as a humorist, he brought joy to audiences every week on Hee-Haw and the Opry stage. Offstage, he was a private man who lived simply, preferring a modest cabin outside Nashville with his wife Estelle. They were well-liked in their community, often stopping to chat with neighbors on their way home from shows. But one November night in 1973, that quiet life was shattered in a way no one could have imagined. On November 10th, Stringbean and Estelle returned home from the Opry to find burglars inside their house. The intruders, knowing the couple's routine, had been lying in wait, believing Stringbean kept large amounts of cash at home. When confronted, the thieves shot both Stringbean and Estelle at close range, killing them instantly. Their bodies were discovered the next morning by fellow Opry star Louis Marshall, Grandpa Jones, who had stopped by to check on them. The murders shocked Nashville, leading to a massive manhunt and eventual convictions for the killers. The crime scene became one of the most infamous in country music history, not just for its brutality, but for the way it ended the life of a man whose only aim was to make people smile. Stringbean's death was a devastating reminder that danger can find you even in the safety of your own home. And if his life ended in violence, the next tragedy came as the result of an accident no one saw coming. Hank Williams was more than a country star. He was a cultural icon whose songs like I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry and Your Cheatin' Heart became part of America's musical DNA. His voice carried a raw, emotional truth that resonated with millions, and his songwriting set a standard for generations to come. But behind the music, Hank's health was deteriorating, strained by years of alcohol abuse, back problems, and the pressures of fame. As 1952 turned to 1953, he was set to perform in West Virginia, determined to keep his career alive despite his fragile condition. On New Year's Eve, 1952, Williams hired a college student named Charles Carr to drive him from Montgomery, Alabama, to his next show in Canton, Ohio, after a flight was canceled due to bad weather. The trip was grueling, made worse by Hank's ill health. He was reportedly in pain, dozing on and off and drinking to dull his discomfort. Somewhere along the route in the early hours of January 1st, Carr realized Hank was unresponsive in the back seat. He pulled over in Oak Hill, West Virginia, and called for help, but it was too late. The 29-year-old legend was gone. The cause was listed as heart failure, likely brought on by a combination of poor health and alcohol. News of his death spread like wildfire, and fans wept openly in the streets of Montgomery. His funeral drew thousands, a sea of mourners standing shoulder to shoulder to say goodbye to the man who had given voice to their own heartbreak. Hank's death was a loss so profound it reshaped country music overnight, and if his story ended quietly on a cold New Year's morning, the next would end in a crash that took multiple stars at once. Cowboy Copas was one of the stalwarts of the Grand Ole Opry, a smooth-voiced singer whose career stretched from the 1940s honky-tonk days into the modern Nashville sound. Known for hits like Signed, Sealed, and Delivered, he was beloved for his warmth with fans, often lingering long after shows to shake hands and pose for photographs. By early 1963, Copas was enjoying a late career resurgence, performing alongside friends and fellow Opry stars. But on March 5th of that year, he boarded a plane in Kansas City that would never make it home. The small Piper Comanche was piloted by Randy Hughes and also carried Patsy Cline and Hawkshaw Hawkins. After a stop in Dyersburg, Tennessee, to refuel, the group set out toward Nashville despite the worsening weather. Less than 15 minutes into the flight, the aircraft vanished from radar. That night, searchers combed the rolling hills near Camden, Tennessee, where they discovered the shattered wreckage. The crash had been violent, leaving no survivors. Investigators cited pilot disorientation in poor conditions as the likely cause. News of the loss devastated the Opry community. 3 stars gone in an instant, their absence felt most deeply by fans who had just seen them on stage days earlier. Vigils sprang up in Nashville, and radio stations played their songs on repeat in tribute. Copas's passing was part of a single tragedy that robbed the genre of multiple voices at once. And if his end came among friends in the sky, the next story would see a star taken in a solitary moment on a quiet Tennessee road. Hawkshaw Hawkins was known for his towering height, deep baritone voice, and a string of hits that blended traditional country with smooth balladry. Songs like Lonesome 77203 showcased his ability to capture heartbreak in a way that resonated deeply with fans. Offstage, Hawkins was admired for his generosity, often using his rising fame to help struggling musicians get their start. In March 1963, he joined friends Patsy Cline and Cowboy Copas for a benefit show in Kansas City, a performance that would be his last. On March 5th, the group boarded the Piper Comanche piloted by Randy Hughes for the flight back to Nashville. The weather was deteriorating quickly, with low clouds and strong winds sweeping across Tennessee. After refueling in Dyersburg, they pressed on hoping to beat the worst of the storm. But minutes later, the plane disappeared from radar and slammed into a wooded area near Camden. The impact was catastrophic. News crews captured haunting images of the wreckage, and Nashville mourned yet another Opry star lost in the same crash. Hawkins' wife, fellow country singer Jean Shepard, was left to raise their children alone, a personal loss that underscored the human cost behind the headlines. For fans, the grief was compounded. 3 beloved artists gone in the blink of an eye. Hawkins' death, alongside Cline and Copas, remains one of the most devastating single accidents in country music history. And if his fate was sealed by the sky, the next tragedy would come on the waters of a Kentucky lake. Randy Hughes was best known as the talented guitarist and manager for Patsy Cline, but he was also an accomplished pilot. In addition to guiding Cline's career, he often flew her and other Opry stars to gigs, a role that blended convenience with camaraderie. Hughes was well liked in Nashville's close-knit music circles, remembered as a dependable friend who could be counted on in a pinch. On March 5th, 1963, he was not only managing the return trip from Kansas City, he was at the controls of the plane. The Piper Comanche left Kansas City after the benefit show, carrying Hughes, Cline, Hawkins, and Copas. They refueled in Dyersburg, Tennessee, before heading toward Nashville in worsening weather. With clouds closing in and visibility plummeting, Hughes attempted to navigate through the conditions. Less than 15 minutes into that leg, the plane went down in a wooded area near Camden. The crash claimed all 4 lives instantly. The official report cited spatial disorientation in bad weather, a condition that can quickly overwhelm even experienced pilots. In the days that followed, Hughes's role in the tragedy was discussed quietly but respectfully. He had been trying to bring his friends home, unaware that the storm would turn deadly. His funeral, like the others, drew crowds of grieving fans and fellow musicians who saw the accident as an unthinkable blow to the heart of country music. Hughes's death closed the circle on a single event that took 4 Opry regulars in one violent moment. And if this disaster had shaken the very foundation of Nashville, the next tragedy would happen decades later, but with the same sudden and brutal finality. John Denver was one of the most recognizable voices in American music, with a catalog that blended country, folk, and pop into songs that celebrated nature and simple living. Hits like Take Me Home, Country Roads made him a household name, and his easygoing charm endeared him to audiences worldwide. Though his commercial peak came in the 1970s, Denver continued to tour and record, often performing benefit concerts and environmental campaigns close to his heart. Offstage, he was known for his love of flying, a passion that would ultimately claim his life. On October 12, 1997, Denver took off from Monterey Peninsula Airport in California in a small experimental aircraft he had recently purchased. He was alone in the plane, conducting a short recreational flight over the Pacific coast. Witnesses reported seeing the plane make several turns before suddenly pitching downward and slamming into the water just off the coast. Rescue crews rushed to the scene, but the impact had been fatal on contact. The National Transportation Safety Board later concluded that Denver had lost control while attempting to switch fuel tanks, a maneuver complicated by awkwardly placed controls. News of his death spread instantly, shocking fans and fellow musicians alike. Memorials sprang up not only in his home state of Colorado, but around the world, a testament to the reach of his music. Denver's death was a reminder that even the most experienced pilots can be undone by a moment's miscalculation. And if his final moments came over the water, the next tragedy would unfold in the stillness of an isolated cabin. Mindy McCready burst onto the country scene in the mid-1990s with hits like Guys Do It All the Time, her powerful voice and striking presence making her one of the most promising young stars of the era. She was known for her candor with fans, often speaking openly about her life's ups and downs. But behind the stage lights, McCready battled personal demons, struggling with addiction, troubled relationships, and legal problems. By the 2010s, she was living quietly in Arkansas, far from Nashville's spotlight. On February 17, 2013, McCready was found dead on the porch of her home in Heber Springs from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. The tragedy came just weeks after the death of her boyfriend, record producer David Wilson, under circumstances that were still under investigation. Friends said McCready had been struggling deeply with grief and isolation, compounded by ongoing custody battles for her children. Reports indicated she had also shot and killed the couple's dog, a disturbing detail that underscored her emotional turmoil in those final hours. News of her death sent shockwaves through the industry, with many lamenting the lack of mental health support available to artists under public pressure. Tributes from fans poured in online, recalling her early days and the music that had first brought her into their lives. McCready's passing was a stark reminder that not all tragedies are accidents. Some are the culmination of years of quiet pain, and if hers was a slow build to a heartbreaking end, the next story would be sudden and violently swift. Though Jim Croce is often remembered as a folk singer, his storytelling style and crossover appeal brought him into the orbit of country audiences as well. Songs like Bad Bad Leroy Brown and Time in a Bottle showcased a knack for narrative that resonated with fans across genres. In 1973, Croce was on the verge of becoming one of the decade's biggest stars, selling out shows and recording hit after hit. Known for his humble demeanor, he was quick to share laughs with fans and crew alike, making every concert feel intimate. But one September evening, his rising career came to an abrupt and permanent stop. On September 20th, 1973, after performing a show at Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana, Croce boarded a small chartered Beechcraft E-18S with 5 others, including his lead guitarist Maury Muleisen. The plane never made it past the end of the runway. Investigators later determined that the pilot failed to clear a tree line during takeoff. The aircraft clipped the treetops, crashed, and burst into flames, killing everyone on board instantly. Croce was just 30 years old, and his wife received a letter from him the following day, mailed before the flight, in which he spoke of wanting to leave the road and spend more time with his family. News of the accident broke before dawn, and by morning, radio stations across the country were playing his songs in tribute. Croce's death was a cruel end to a career that had barely begun to show its full potential, and if his journey ended at the edge of a runway, the next tragedy would take place on the rails of a moving train. Roy Acuff Jr., the only son of Grand Ole Opry legend Roy Acuff, grew up in the shadow of one of country music's most influential figures. While his father's fame loomed large, Acuff Jr. pursued his own career, performing regionally and writing songs with a straightforward, heartfelt style. Fans who met him described him as humble and approachable, a young man eager to build his own legacy while honoring his father's. But in December 1964, a tragic turn on the rails would cut that dream short. On December 26th, Acuff Jr. was returning home after visiting friends when his car became stalled on a railroad crossing near Knoxville, Tennessee. Accounts vary on whether the vehicle had mechanical trouble or if he was attempting to beat the train, but the result was the same. A fast-moving freight train bore down on the crossing, giving him little to no time to escape. The impact was catastrophic, dragging the car along the tracks before coming to a stop. Acuff Jr. was pronounced dead at the scene. News reached his father quickly, and Opry members recalled the elder Acuff arriving in shock, struggling to process the loss. For the tight-knit country community, the tragedy was a reminder that fame offered no protection from fate's cruelties. Fans sent hundreds of sympathy letters to the Acuff family, many recalling seeing father and son together at Opry events. Acuff Jr.'s passing was a quiet tragedy in the grand scope of country history, but for those who knew him, it was a wound that never fully healed. And if his life ended under the roar of a train, the next story would end in the crushing weight of a tour bus accident. Though Bruce Hampton's music leaned more toward Southern rock and jam band styles, his influence touched country and Americana circles for decades. Known for his improvisational performances and generosity toward younger musicians, Hampton was the kind of artist who thrived in live settings. Fans loved his eccentric personality, his storytelling between songs, and his willingness to take musical risks. In May 2017, he gathered friends and fans for what was meant to be a celebration, his 70th birthday concert in Atlanta, Georgia. Midway through the show, surrounded by an all-star lineup of musicians, Hampton began performing "Turn On Your Love Light." As the song reached its peak, he suddenly collapsed on stage. At first, many in the crowd thought it was part of the act, given his reputation for playful antics. But as the moments ticked on and he didn't rise, concern spread. Musicians and crew members rushed to his side while medics were called in from the venue floor. He was transported to a nearby hospital, where he was pronounced dead from a massive heart attack. The surreal nature of the event, an artist passing in the middle of a song, in front of an audience celebrating his life, left fans in shock. Social media flooded with tributes, videos, and disbelief from those who had witnessed his final performance. Hampton's death blurred the line between art and reality in a way that stunned all who were there. And if his final note came under the stage lights, the next tragedy would happen in the middle of an ordinary drive. Jim Owen was best known for his uncanny portrayals of Hank Williams Sr., a role he played on stage for decades to the delight of traditional country fans. A talented singer and storyteller in his own right, Owen earned respect for keeping the old songs alive and delivering them with heartfelt sincerity. Offstage, he was known for his easy humor and his ability to connect with fans in small venues, just as easily as in packed theaters. Even late into his career, he was still performing regularly, keeping the spirit of classic country alive for new generations. On April 7th, 2020, Owen was driving near his home in Branson, Missouri, when his vehicle collided with another car at an intersection. The exact cause of the crash remains unclear, but police reports indicated that wet road conditions and poor visibility may have been factors. The impact was severe, and despite the quick arrival of emergency crews, Owen was pronounced dead at the scene. News of his passing hit especially hard among fans of traditional country, who saw him as one of the last living links to the golden era of the Opry. Tributes poured in from tribute show performers, historians, and artists who had shared the stage with him over the years. Owen's passing was a quiet blow to those who loved the old songs, a reminder that preserving history is just as important as making it. And if his story ended at an intersection on a rainy day, the next would end in a fiery crash that claimed an entire band. The Kentucky Headhunters were known for their raucous blend of country rock and southern blues, winning fans with high-energy performances and an unpolished, down-home charm. By the early 1990s, they were selling out shows across the country, often traveling long distances in their tour bus to keep up with the demanding schedule. The crew behind them, the unsung members of the touring band and support staff, were equally vital to the group's success, handling everything from sound checks to gear setup. But in August 1993, a return trip from a festival show in the South turned catastrophic. On August 17th, while driving through a stretch of rural highway in Georgia, the Headhunters' tour bus blew a tire, causing the driver to lose control. The bus swerved sharply, crossed into oncoming traffic, and rolled into a roadside ditch. The crash was violent, leaving the vehicle crumpled and several passengers trapped inside. Emergency crews worked for hours to free survivors. 2 members of the touring support team were killed instantly, and several others were hospitalized with critical injuries. The band, traveling in a separate vehicle at the time, received word of the accident just minutes before taking the stage at a local benefit show, a performance they canceled immediately to rush to the scene. The tragedy left a deep scar on the Headhunters camp, with tributes and benefit concerts held in honor of those lost. Fans mailed letters and donations, a show of support for a band whose own family had been torn apart on the road. The bus accident was a brutal reminder that the road, for all its promises of adventure and freedom, can turn deadly in seconds. And if that tragedy shook an entire crew, the next would strike a single man whose name was already legend. Patsy Montana was a pioneering figure in country music, the first female artist to sell 1 million records with her 1935 hit, I Want to Be a Cowboy's Sweetheart. Her yodeling style, infectious energy, and trailblazing spirit opened doors for generations of women in the genre. Even in her later years, Montana remained active, performing at festivals and Opry events, and greeting fans with the same warmth she had shown in her youth. To those who knew her, she was living proof that passion for the music could last a lifetime. But in 1996, a simple misstep would end her remarkable journey. On May 3rd, 1996, while at her home in San Jacinto, California, Montana reportedly slipped while descending a short set of stairs leading to her garden. The fall caused severe head trauma, and despite being rushed to a nearby hospital, she never regained consciousness. She passed away later that evening at the age of 87. Friends and family described her final years as joyful and full of music, making the sudden nature of her passing even harder to accept. News of her death spread quickly among traditional country circles, sparking tributes from younger artists who credited her as a direct inspiration for their own careers. At her memorial service, fellow musicians performed her signature song, their voices cracking with emotion as they honored the woman who had blazed the trail for them all. Montana's death was a sobering reminder that even the most enduring legends can be lost in an instant. Her legacy, however, remains unshaken, a testament to the resilience, charm, and courage of country's earliest stars. The road, the skies, the quiet moments at home. Country music's history is filled with sudden endings that no one saw coming. These weren't just losses of voices or talent, but of lives that carried the stories, memories, and heart of the genre. Some were taken in the middle of their prime, others after decades of shaping the sound we know today. Which of these tragedies stayed with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from behind the curtain of country music.